Lenovo's Legion 7 series was some of the best gaming laptops that you could buy last year. But after a number of changes in this year's models and tougher competition, is that still the case? I've got their latest Legion 7i here for testing, so let's find out. There's a lot that I need to tell you. Right after this message from our sponsor, Ugreen. The Ugreen Nexode 140-watt charger lets you quickly charge up to 2 laptops and a phone at the same time with 2 USB Type-C ports and a Type-A port. Ditch your other AC adapters with this one small portable charger, perfect for charging all your devices on the go. With the latest PD 3.1 standard, you can fully power the latest devices like Apple's MacBook Pro 16 and charge it from empty up to 56% in just 30 minutes. You can check out the Ugreen Nexode 140-watt charger with the sponsored link below the video. The Legion 7i has an anodized aluminum chassis with Lenovo's storm grey finish, so the whole thing is metal and feels great. All edges of the keyboard deck have a chamfered finish this year, which I thought felt fine during normal use. The corners could feel a little sharp if you're rubbing your hands up against them, but you could just not do that. There's only some flex to the keyboard and screen. The build quality feels more than solid enough when actually using it normally though. Just like last year, there's plenty of RGB lighting, including the light bar on the front, the keyboard, in the air exhaust vents, and the Legion logo on the lid, all of which is controlled by Lenovo's new Spectrum software. More on that soon. The screen goes the full way back for sharing, and it was easy to open with one finger as the middle part of the lid sticks out a little. The hinge seems sturdy even when ripping it open hard, but despite this, the lid still feels easy and smooth to open, and the screen doesn't wobble even when typing hard. This photo from Lenovo's parts list site shows that the hinges are all metal and appear to connect to the lid well, just like last year's version, which was already an improved design compared to the 2020 model that was known to have issues. The 7i feels quite portable with the width and depth similar to smaller 15-inch gaming laptops, despite managing to squeeze in a 16-inch screen. The height listed by Lenovo seems to apply to the thinnest part at the front, because I measured the rear closer to 2.5 centimeters or just under an inch thick, not including the height from the rubber feet underneath. The laptop alone weighs 2.5 kilos or 5.6 pounds, increasing to 3.7 kilos or under 2.8 pounds with the 300-watt power brick and cables for charging. I've got the maxed out Legion 7i with Intel's 16-core i9-12900HX CPU, Nvidia's RTX 3080 Ti graphics, 32 gigs of DDR5 memory, and a 16-inch 165Hz screen with G-Sync. But you can customize and check out lower spec options for less money with the link below the video. There's a 1080p camera above the screen in the middle, but there's no Windows Hello face unlock. You can use the switch on the right-hand side to physically disconnect the camera for privacy. Here's how the camera and microphones look and sound, and this is what it sounds like while I'm typing on the keyboard. The keyboard has per-key RGB backlighting, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. When you hold down the function key, you can see all the other keys that you can interact with, including the up and down arrow keys, which are used to change the brightness of all lighting between 3 levels. This adjusts the keyboard, light bar on the front, Legion logo on the lid, and lighting in the air exhaust vents together. You can also press the function and spacebar to cycle between 6 different lighting effects, and I like that it shows you on screen which profile you're currently in. The new Legion Spectrum software is part of Lenovo's management software and is used to customize the RGB lighting. It's more basic compared to Corsair's IQ software that they used in the Legion 7 series over the last couple of years, but I'll take it to not have the battery drain issues like the older Legion 7s. Basic means the software is easy to use, and you can customize all 6 profiles by controlling any of the areas that have lighting with a number of built-in effects or static colors. There are quite a few different effects. The Legion Aura Sync feature is the new one where the lighting will attempt to match the content currently displayed on the screen. You also get 9 levels of brightness control through here too, 3 times as much compared to using the arrow key shortcuts. As for the keyboard itself, personally I really like typing on Legion keyboards. To me they just feel great. That said, my partner doesn't like Legion keyboards. She finds that the keys are sometimes harder to push down than they should be, especially the top row of function keys in particular. And to be fair, I did notice that sometimes too, because we press F10 to start a game benchmark run, and sometimes my normal press just wouldn't work, but typing on the letters was good for me. Key travel has increased this year to 1.5mm, up from 1.3mm last year, so key presses should feel a little deeper. The Legion 7 comes with this little kit which includes 4 ceramic keys, 8 replacement scissor switches, and a metal tool to remove keycaps. The idea is that ceramic keys transfer less heat, so Lenovo is giving you the option to put these keycaps on yourself. The problem is, the instructions note that you shouldn't change these often as you're dealing with delicate parts. I broke 2 of the 4 switches the first time I changed to the ceramic keys, so I've just left them on ever since, which is why my WASD keys are white, but that's not the default. This explains why you get 8 replacement switches, which are easy to install. I figure this way, Lenovo at least gives you the chance to try out the ceramic keys with no risk. And assuming you don't like it, you can still go back even if you completely destroy all 4 switches when you take off the original keys, and then destroy all 4 switches again when you take off the ceramic keys. So yeah, there's nothing really to lose if you do want to try out those ceramic keycaps at least once, because you've got enough switches even if you mess up completely. Technically, you should be able to replace any keycaps on the keyboard that are the same shape and size, like other letters. But Lenovo's hardware maintenance guide notes that you can only swap the switches for WASD. So if that's true, personally, I don't think I would risk taking off any of the other keys, given how easy it was for me to break the switches on WASD. They aren't forcing you to use these ceramic keycaps, so just think of it as a bit of an optional bonus. And it is cool to see them trying something new. However, that said, personally, I'm not a fan of these ceramic keys, but some people might enjoy them. I found that the ceramic keycaps felt slipperier as they have a smooth texture, and although they felt a little cooler when the laptop is running cool and not doing much, with an actual game running and the laptop being warm for a while, I thought the ceramic keys felt warmer, and this was seen with the thermal camera too. This year's Legion 7i has force sensors under the WASD keys. Basically, the idea is if you press the keys lightly in a game, you walk, but then as you push down harder, you start running without having to hold down another key like Shift. The included Hydra software controls how this works, so you can customize the force level in single percentage increments for each of the 12 included game profiles, though you can create your own profile for any game and choose what actions should happen at what key sensitivity levels. I wasn't able to get it working properly in Assassin's Creed Valhalla or Assassin's Creed Odyssey, both of which are meant to be supported out of the box with built-in profiles. I did spend a few hours troubleshooting, but long story short, it seems like those configuration files are based around the assumption that those games were installed on a D drive, which this laptop doesn't have, and with the Epic Games client when I was using Ubisoft. I did try manually editing the configuration file to point it to the correct game location on C drive in the Ubisoft folder, but I couldn't get it working. So I think there are definitely some updates needed there in order to get the games that it claims work out of the box working. Though I don't think Lenovo is actually behind this software. Now, to be fair, it did work perfectly fine in PUBG, so it's just that some of the included profiles for some games aren't quite right. After using it for a while, I could see it being beneficial if I was bothered to tune the pressure sensitivity levels properly, because for many of the games by default, I found that like if I wanted to go forward, I had to press the W harder than I would normally press it to walk forward, and then to run, I would have to kind of push down much harder. But yeah, you can change all that through software. So as long as you're willing to customize it a bit for you, then yeah, it's probably going to be fine. The power button is found above the keyboard, and it doubles as a fingerprint scanner, which I found to work fast and accurately. The glass touchpad clicks down anywhere, feels nice and smooth, is a reasonable size, and is accurate to click with. The left side has an air exhaust vent and a couple of Thunderbolt 4 Type-C ports. The right side has an air exhaust too, as well as a 3.5mm audio combo jack, the camera disconnect switch for privacy, and there's a Type-C port on this side too, but no Thunderbolt here, just USB 3.2 Gen 1. The rest of the ports are on the back in between more air exhaust vents. From left to right, we've got a 2.5GB Ethernet port facing the preferred way so you don't have to lift up the laptop to unplug, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, HDMI 2.1 output, two USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type-A ports, and the rectangular power input on the far right. I really like that the port icons on the back get lit up, so you can easily see where you're plugging a cable in when sitting in front of the machine without needing to turn it around, regardless of the lighting situation of your room. You can hold the function key and press the letter U to turn these on or off though. Both of the Type-C ports on the left, the Type-C port on the back, and HDMI port on the back all connect directly to the NVIDIA graphics, bypassing the integrated graphics and Optimus. And that happens whether or not Optimus is on or off on the laptop. There's some kind of weird bug with the two Type-C ports on the left though. I couldn't actually get them to display anything on an external screen with the latest drivers from NVIDIA. But if I instead installed the latest NVIDIA drivers for this laptop directly from Lenovo, which were a bit older, those ports worked perfectly fine. So yeah, a bit of a weird software bug that will probably be fixed. We also confirmed that the HDMI port could run a 4K external screen at up to 120Hz 12-bit with G-Sync, so variable refresh rate support. Only the Type-C port on the back could be used to charge the laptop, and this year Lenovo has increased the charge limit up from 100 watts to 135 watts, but only if the charger supports 20 volts 6.75 amps. So unfortunately Lenovo don't seem to be using the PD 3.1 standard, which I think sticks to 5 amps but instead varies the voltage. So this 140 watt charger I've got from Ugreen maxes out at 100 watts when connected to the 7i, and that would be the case with most other modern chargers too. I think you need to have a special Lenovo charger in order to actually run it at the full 135 watts, which I unfortunately do not have. So the upcoming benchmarks I've got with a Type-C power source connected were limited to 100 watts rather than the maximum 135 watts. Getting inside requires unscrewing 10 Phillips head screws, and the 4 down the front are shorter than the rest, so don't forget when putting them back in. I found it way easier to pry open compared to this year's Legion Slim 7i. Review on that coming soon, so make sure you're subscribed. And I'll leave a link to these tools I use to open laptops below the video. There are a few metal covers over the components inside which can be removed. We've got the battery right down the front, 2 memory slots just above that, the installed M.2 SSD on the right with Wi-Fi 6E card just above, and the second empty M.2 storage slot on the left. The Wi-Fi performance was decent compared to other gaming laptops, and was ahead of last year's Legion 7, which came with Wi-Fi 6 rather than the newer 6E like this year's version. Though to be fair, my router doesn't support 6E, so both are limited to 6 here. The memory that came in mine was single rank X8, so upgrading to dual rank may boost performance in some workloads. The spec sheet mentions that DDR5 5400 is possible with overclocking. I enabled the memory overclocking option in the BIOS, but didn't see this change from the default DDR5 4800 in Windows, or any additional options in Vantage. So I'm guessing it's only possible with a different memory configuration, or if you otherwise upgrade it yourself. The installed 1TB NVMe M.2 PCIe Gen 4 SSD was performing quite well, and the second M.2 slot supports Gen 4 as well. Unfortunately, the primary M.2 slot that the SSD comes installed in has some limitations if you want to upgrade. It's not possible to install an M.2 drive that has chips on both sides, like this 4TB SSD from Team Group. The chips underneath come into contact with the cable connector underneath and prevent proper installation, but I confirmed that this drive fits perfectly fine in the second M.2 slot. I've given upgradability the same score as last year's version, with half a point removed because one of the M.2 slots is limited in the SSDs you can install. Maybe I'm being pedantic, as you're still able to upgrade both M.2 drives, both memory slots, and Wi-Fi, which are about all the upgrades we can hope for from a modern gaming laptop. You just can't max out both M.2 slots with full capacity drives, only one of them. The speakers are found underneath on the left and right corners towards the front. I thought they sounded good for a Windows gaming laptop, though they can't touch Apple's MacBook speakers. But I thought there was enough bass, and they sound clearer at higher volume levels compared to last year's Legion 7. The Latencymon results weren't looking good though. The 7i is powered by the largest possible 99.9 Wh battery. You can press the function and R shortcut to manually swap the screen's refresh rate between the default 165Hz to the lower 60Hz, which will help extend battery life. Unfortunately, this doesn't happen automatically when you unplug the power cable, which is the case with laptops from ASUS and MSI. Now, that said, if you use either Vantage or or advanced Optimus to run directly on the NVIDIA discrete graphics, when you unplug the power, the screen will automatically drop to about 48 Hz. And it does this without the screen flashing black, so it's not obvious at first. But moving the mouse around or something definitely looks slower compared to when it's plugged in, indicating a 48 Hz refresh rate, though I don't actually know for sure what the exact value is. And that's because Windows still reports it as a 165 Hz refresh rate, despite there being a clear difference to the mouse cursor and stuff when moving it around on the screen. Apparently this is done at the screen firmware level, which I guess explains why Windows isn't able to see it and thinks it's still running at 165 Hz. And this means that it would also work in other operating systems like Linux or anything else. Now that sounds cool, but considering that most people are probably going to be running with Optimus and the integrated graphics enabled to get best battery life, you're not actually going to benefit from it unless you're running a game or something. Like, if you're not gaming, it doesn't really make sense to turn Optimus off and then run on battery power so that you can get the 48 Hz screen automatically. You would get way more battery life leaving Optimus on. And then if you really wanted, you could press the Function and R shortcut to swap the screen's refresh rate from 165 Hz to 60 Hz, though that is a manual process. The laptop was literally lasting 2 hours longer in the same YouTube video playback test simply by pressing the Function and R shortcut at the start. This is why I want Lenovo to at least give us the option to have the automatic refresh rate change happen like other brands do. It's objectively a good feature to extend battery life. As pressing Function and R isn't that difficult, I've used the best result for comparing with other laptops, as I did this for others that have this feature too, like those from Razer. AMD Ryzen-based laptops generally last longer compared to Intel, and this is why last year's AMD-based Legion 7 was lasting longer despite having a smaller 80 Wh battery. Don't forget, last year's version had the Corsair iQOO battery drain issue, and my measurement here was with that disabled. With iQOO running in the background even with RGB lighting off, last year's Legion 7 was instead lasting just 176 minutes. That's lower than this year's version, which doesn't have iQOO, but I'd expect this year's Legion 7 to do much better here if it was also the AMD version. The Vantage software allows us to limit the maximum battery charge level to 75 to 80% to help extend the lifespan of the battery. However, you can't use this at the same time as rapid charge, which does what it says and charges the battery faster. Let's check out thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a vapor chamber cooler with 2 fans, which exhaust air out of both the left and right sides, as well as out of the vents on the back. And we can see there are plenty of holes underneath where the fans are for air intake. Both the CPU and GPU are using a phase change thermal compound, and this year the fans are 12 volt with the new design and thinner blades. And this year's model now brings some air in through the keyboard. The Vantage software lets us change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are quiet, balance, and performance. Balance mode also has an optional AI setting, which is meant to provide an optimal experience in supported games. Think best performance without the fans going too loud. You can also press the Function and Q shortcut to change between the 3 performance modes, and the color of the power button will change so you can easily tell which is currently in use. As noted here, performance mode can't be used when running on battery power though. We've also got the option of turning on CPU and GPU overclocks through Vantage too. You can do some customization through here, but where we've tested with overclock modes enabled, we've stuck to the default settings. No custom tuning here, because that will ultimately depend on Silicon Lottery and vary between laptops. The overclock options only work in balanced or performance modes when plugged in. At the time of recording in mid-September 2022, unfortunately there still isn't manual fan control with this laptop. However, there is the Legion Zone software which does give you some basic control, but unfortunately right now this app is only available in Chinese. So hopefully we see those features integrated into Vantage in future, but right now by default there's no way to customize the fans. Lenovo says they're confident that the machine learning they're using to find the optimal settings for different thermal modes will give the best experience to most people though. But I'd still like to see manual fan control for enthusiasts that want to have the option. Just because it's there doesn't mean everyone will use it, but the people that do want it will appreciate it. That's the way I see it anyway. Unfortunately, the third-party Legion fan control software probably won't be updated to support this laptop, as it's not developed anymore. But on behalf of me and the whole community, thanks to everyone that was involved in developing that. The internal temperatures were on the cooler side when just sitting there idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst-case this full load scenario. Thermal throttling wasn't being hit in this workload with any performance mode, and the internals weren't actually getting that hot in these tests. It gets warmer as we go up from the lowest to highest performance mode, and enabling the default CPU and GPU overclock options in Vantage didn't affect this. The cooling pad I test with, linked below the video, was able to lower the temperatures by 8 degrees Celsius thanks to the big vents underneath. These are the clock speeds being hit during the same stress tests. The GPU clock speed increases with the overclocks enabled, and the cooling pad doesn't make any improvements to performance because thermals weren't a limit. The CPU clock speeds were the same in balance or performance mode, with or without the overclocks. We can see why when looking at the power levels being reached. The 16-core CPU gets limited to just 35 watts in both balance and performance modes, while the GPU is active at the same time, which seems quite low compared to other laptops. We'll see how this affects games soon. Hardware Info was reporting PL1 as 55 watts and PL2 at 157 watts, so I'm not too sure why the CPU wasn't going higher, given it's not exactly running hot and we've got a 300 watt power brick. Nvidia's RTX 3080 Ti maxes out at 175 watts with dynamic boost, so when the CPU isn't active. But even with the CPU under load, performance mode was still able to run it at 170 watts, which is very high, though the trade-off is lower CPU power. Here's how an actual game performs with the different performance modes in use. Considering the higher 2560 by 1600 resolution of the screen, more GPU power will be beneficial in most games instead of dedicating more power budget to the CPU, as more pixels need that GPU power to perform well. We can also see that using a 100 watt Type-C charger gave us the same result as just using quiet mode with a 300 watt power brick. But if you're happy running at 1080p instead, this game scored 47 FPS on Type-C. We can also see that balance mode with the AI setting enabled boosted frame rate, despite the fans not being particularly louder. Performance mode was still a little ahead, and then enabling the CPU and GPU overclock options boosted it further. Although CPU performance was limited to just 35 watts with the GPU going hard at the same time, a CPU-only workload like Cinebench was able to run well above 100 watts in performance mode. The CPU actually instantly thermal throttled at 100 degrees Celsius in this test with performance mode, which is why there's a power limit range listed in performance mode. I don't think this is a big deal considering the CPU is pushing 115 watts in a thinner feeling machine. Testing with a 100 watt Type-C charger connected resulted in the CPU running with a 45 watt TDP in this test. But again, expect better results if you've got one that can support the Legion's 135 watt maximum. I didn't find the CPU overclock option in Vantage to help here. This was expected because the options in software only really let you increase the core ratios, but these need more power to be hit. Thermals were already a limit in Cinebench, so more power isn't possible. Now you could try and increase the core voltage offset slider to increase power by up to 0.16 volts, but this also increases heat, so given we're already thermal throttling in this specific test, it didn't help. Unfortunately, the slider through Vantage doesn't let you set a negative core voltage offset, so you can't undervolt in here, but that is still possible with software like Intel XTU, as the HX processor is unlocked. I did also try boost the power slider in the combined CPU and GPU stress test earlier, and although CPU TDP boosted from 35 to 46 watts, the actual performance shown by the clock speeds didn't change at all, so it was just adding more voltage and heat for no reason. Anyway, the CPU performance was one of the best that we've seen so far, both in terms of single and multi-core performance. I mean, both scores are basically the same as MSI's far larger Titan GT77 with the same processor, at least at stock, because to be fair, the Titan has more space for cooling, so with some tuning, it could probably do better than this. Regardless, good CPU performance from the 7i when the GPU isn't under load in spite of higher temps. Performance drops back quite a lot when we unplug the charger and instead run purely off of battery power. I mean, a 6-core Ryzen laptop from last year was ahead of it in multi-core performance. Kind of embarrassing for the 16 cores in the 7i. Generally speaking, Ryzen seems to do better than Intel on battery, so I would expect the AMD-based Legion 7 to do better than this. Most laptops I test are in the low 30 degrees Celsius range on the keyboard at idle, and the Legion 7i was right in line with this too. It gets warmer when we start the stress tests in quiet mode, and is definitely warm now, but but not hot. The higher balanced mode gets warmer, but as we've seen, it is performing better now too. The highest performance mode is kind of similar. It does feel pretty warm in the middle, but resting my hand on the WASD keys for gaming was okay. The back felt hot, but you don't need to touch there. Let's have a listen to the fans. The fans were always audible when just sitting there idle in quiet mode, so don't expect complete silence. It gets louder in the higher performance modes as you'd expect, but the overclocks didn't change the fan speed as they didn't do much. Using a cooling pad actually lowered the max fan noise a little, but we instead get a little hum sound from the specific pad that I test with, which again is linked below the video. Just before we get into the game benchmarks, let's check out the screen, given that's what you're going to be looking at while actually playing games. My 7i has a 16-inch 2560 by 1600 165Hz screen, but there's meant to be a 240Hz one as well. It's got a 16:10 aspect ratio, which means that there's a bit more vertical screen space compared to standard 16:9 laptops. It's got a mux switch, which can be toggled through the Vantage software by changing the GPU working mode to DGPU mode and rebooting, but you probably won't need to use that because it's also got Advanced Optimus, which means you can turn Optimus on or off without a reboot. The screen has G-Sync, but only when Optimus isn't in use, though it still has Adaptive Sync with Optimus on. With Advanced Optimus in the default automatic select mode, when you launch a game, it will automatically run without Optimus for best performance and G-Sync on. The 10-bit screen has decent color gamut, but not super impressive for professional content creation work if you're doing that on the side. Don't get me wrong, it looks nice, but this is a gaming panel first and foremost. The screen is rated for 500 nits, but we measured ours a little above this at 527 maxed out, so fairly bright considering most laptops are closer to 300. It can get very dim too, and there aren't any big dips throughout the brightness range, so you should be able to adjust it how you like with good granularity. The Vantage software lets you enable or disable overdrive mode, which affects screen response time. Overdrive is enabled by default, which results in a 4.85 millisecond average gray-to-gray response time, lower than the 6 milliseconds needed for transitions to occur within the 165Hz refresh window. This introduces some overshoot and undershoot though, which you can remove by disabling overdrive mode, but this lowers the response time a little to 7.37 milliseconds. There are some other 2560 by 1600 165Hz screens that appear better, but honestly, it's such a small margin, it's probably not something most people are actually going to notice in practice. Take this year's Legion 5i Pro for example. It's actually using the exact same panel model as the Legion 7i, but it appears a little faster. And that's just because there is some difference between panels that are the same model. It's a margin of error difference. Put simply, the response time is fine and pretty good for a gaming laptop. The total system latency is the amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire appears on the screen in CSGO. The 7i was a little faster compared to last year's AMD-based Legion 7 in this one. A good result, but if you're playing esports games competitively, you might be better off with something higher up on the list. This could in part be due to the lower CPU power limit that we saw in workloads where the GPU is also active, as this would include games. Backlight bleed was okay. There are some lighter patches, but I never noticed these outside of this worst case scenario during normal use, but this will vary between panels. Now let's find out how this maxed out Legion 7i compares against other laptops in games. Although it's got that taller 16:10 screen with a 2560 by 1600 resolution, all testing here has been done at standard 1080p or 1440p resolutions, as this is just what we've got data for the purposes of comparing. But you can check out the video linked below the description after this one if you want to get a better idea of how well this laptop runs games at its native resolution. We've tested 14 games with features like ray tracing, DLSS, and FSR. Cyberpunk 2077 was tested the same on all laptops, and I've got this year's is Legion 7i, shown by the red highlight. It's a little behind a few other RTX 3080 Ti gaming laptops, but not by much. The Scar 17 SE and Titan GT77 are at the top, but those are also larger machines with more cooling space and thermal headroom. Honestly, I was expecting a lower 1080p result based on the 35W CPU power limit we saw in a CPU plus GPU stress test earlier, but the frame rate here was fine. Maybe that would be a bigger difference in esports titles. The 7i is the 5th best result at the higher 1440p resolution, but we're only talking about a 2 FPS gap between the 7i and the best results, which honestly isn't something you're going to notice when playing. That said, some of those bigger laptops had fewer dips in performance, as shown by their higher 1% low values, which may be more noticeable. Regardless, the 7i is still performing very nicely relative to most laptops. Red Dead Redemption 2 was tested with the game's benchmark tool. The Legion 7i was second best here at 1080p, but again, it's close to many of the high-powered 3080 Ti laptops without much difference. I mean, we've got the best laptop CPU and GPU combination available right now, so this is expected. The 7i is still in second place at the higher 1440p resolution. I found it interesting that it's right next to the XMG Neo 15 just below it, as that's water-cooled. The Neo has fewer CPU cores too, but for most games, I'd argue a 14-core 20-thread chip is already plenty. At higher resolutions like this, GPU power is usually a more important factor. Control is a GPU-heavy game, and the Legion 7i was in second place again here too, only beaten by MSI's larger Titan GT77. Again, many other 3080 Ti laptops with similar GPU power limits weren't far behind at all. It's really not a difference you'd notice when playing, but hey, winning's winning. The 7i drops back a few positions at the higher 1440p resolution, which feels kind of silly to say when we're talking about less than a 2 FPS difference to the new second place result. Again, it's a very small difference in actual gaming performance. Other differences between these laptops, like build quality and thermals, would be far more important. One of the top requests you guys wanted to see tested on the 7i was the performance impact of streaming, so I've retested Cyberpunk while also streaming to YouTube at 1080p at the same time with OBS. The performance in gaming was still great even while streaming. Running the game by itself only gave us a 4 to 6% boost to average FPS compared to streaming at the same time. Let me know if this is a test you'd want to see in future reviews, because I was only planning on doing it for the 7i. Here are the 3D Mark results for those that find them useful. Now for some content creator tests. Adobe Premiere was tested with the Puget Systems benchmark tool, and the 7i is doing quite well here. Now, I need to mention the results were a little inconsistent. The highest score was 1399, which would have put it at the top, but this is the average of 5 test runs. Adobe Photoshop likes single-threaded performance, and the 7i was the third best score here too, only coming in a little behind the larger desktop replacement style machines from Asus and MSI, which also have 16-core i9-HX processors. GPU power matters more in DaVinci Resolve, though the 7i is scoring the same as MSI's GE67 with lower tier CPU and GPU. That one has an OLED screen too, so an example of an option that might be better in terms of content creation. We're still building up the Blender data, but the 7i was doing very well compared to other laptops that have high-powered RTX 3080 Ti GPUs. We've also tested SpecViewPerf, which tests out various professional 3D workloads. The BIOS has a lot more options compared to other gaming laptops like Asus, but not quite as much customization as MSI's advanced BIOS. A lot of the options in here can also be modified through the Vantage software anyway, such as overclocking or flip to boot, which automatically powers on the laptop when you open the lid. Linux support was tested with an Ubuntu 22.04 live CD. By default, the keyboard, touchpad, camera, and Ethernet worked. The speakers didn't work out of the box, nor did the Wi-Fi, but that's pretty typical, probably just needs drivers. The keyboard shortcuts for screen and keyboard brightness work, and you can still cycle through the lighting effects with the function and spacebar as they're set in firmware and not software. Likewise, the shortcuts to turn off the lid logo and port lighting work, as well as the function plus Q shortcut to adjust performance modes. Let's discuss pricing and availability next. This will change over time, so refer to that link below the video, as Lenovo are known to frequently run sales. At the time of recording, in the US, the same spec 7i I've tested is listed for close to $3,500 US on B&H, but I'm only using this as a reference because it's out of stock on Lenovo's own website website right now and is just listed as available soon. But apparently the price was closer to $3,300 in the past. Hopefully it comes back in stock at Lenovo's website for that cheaper price, but yeah, again, you'll just have to refer to that link below the video for updates. And that should hopefully have local pricing for many of you because it will redirect you based on your country. Alright, so is this year's Lenovo Legion 7i gaming laptop worth buying? There are definitely some nice improvements from last year's version, including the move to the Spectrum software for managing the RGB lighting. Yeah, it's more basic now, but that also means it's easier to use. The battery drain from the Corsair iQ software in previous versions of the Legion 7 was one of the major problems that I had with recommending it, and now that's gone. The CPUs in last year's Legion 7 lineup maxed out at 8 cores, 16 threads, whether you got the Intel or AMD version. So the jump up to the 16-core, 24-thread 12900HX is a big change, considering the size of this year's version is smaller in most dimensions. I mean, to be fair, it did run quite hot in a CPU-only workload like Cinebench, but I mean, it's a 16-core chip pushing more than 115 watts. What do you expect? I'd still argue that it's not bad at all for this size. Temperatures were also fine in a CPU plus GPU workload due to those thermal improvements mentioned earlier, though the trade-off does seem to be lower CPU power limits when the GPU is active. I don't think this is a big problem though, considering performance in games was still excellent. And with the 2560 by 1600 screen resolution, GPU power is more important anyway. I'm not a fan of the large 300 watt power brick, but it's a max spec laptop, so I get it. And at least there is 135 watt Type-C charging, of course assuming you get the correct charger, as Lenovo don't seem to be using the power delivery 3.1 standard. Battery life wasn't anything exciting, and performance on battery was kind of embarrassing, but that's generally the case from Intel-based laptops. I'd definitely expect better results from the AMD configuration. So if battery life and performance on battery are top requirements for you, then I would definitely suggest looking at the AMD version of the Legion 7. I really wish that Lenovo gave us the feature to do the Function plus R shortcut, but automatically when you unplug the charger, because it's just objectively a great feature that helps improve battery life. The ceramic keys are an interesting idea, but they're not for me as I found them less grippy and warmer compared to the default stock keys. Overall, there's not too much to complain about. Some software updates to fix the bug with the Type-C ports not working properly with the latest NVIDIA drivers would be good, and updates to the Hydra pressure sensitivity software would also be great for those built-in game profiles that don't work. But I don't think anything I've mentioned has been a deal breaker. All things considered, I think the changes make the Legion 7 an even better laptop this year. The Legion 7i is just a well-built high-end gaming laptop that I can easily recommend if you've got the money for it, especially if you love RGB lighting. But what about the thinner Legion Slim 7i? I've got that one too, as well as this year's Legion 5. So make sure you're subscribed for those upcoming reviews. You definitely don't want to miss them. But for now, you can find out how well this Legion 7i performs in 14 games at all setting levels in this video next. We've tested at its native screen resolution with features like ray tracing, DLSS, and FSR to really show you what it's capable of. So I'll see you in that one next.